Speaking of, should we kind of get started here?
Yes, sir. Should I start it or?
I mean, if you have an intro, go for it. I mean, this is Idiot Seeking Village, and Adam, you are my co-host. I am Rich, and we ourselves are not personally bombarding any fishermen with high-grade military equipment. Are you?
No. Is that the intro? Or was I?
No, I mean, okay. I'm riffing right off the top.
Okay.
I mean, right here. I mean, do you have an intro? If not, I mean, I'm all about talking about high-grade military hardware targeting fishermen in the Caribbean Sea.
I guess I'll start with this. Greetings and salutations. This is the Idiots Seeking Village podcast. I am Adam with my co-conspirator, Rich. Now, if people are a little unfortunate to be repeat offenders of this podcast, they might be noticing a little switch up today, Rich. I have seemed to have taken the helm for some odd reason.
I mean, God help us all.
Well, I felt like you needed like a break from the deep dives we were taking. I didn't know if you were going to come back from any more or without a break, a little respite. You're like a spelunker going down into the cave mines with nothing but coming out. So
if there is an activity I'm not going to engage in, it is cave diving.
Or one of those, where they those deep dives where they go like it looks like a half a mile underwater and then come back up with just one breath.
No, I have read all about the Nutty Putty Cave Rescue, and I have no interest in ever partaking in that activity. Nope, just hard no. That's a no for me, dog.
But
do you know about that one?
No, I do not. It sounds like a fantastic name.
I don't know. Maybe we'll do I don't know how this is relevant to anything we normally talk about, but yeah, Nutty Putty. Let's just say the dude went cave diving. He was like 22 or something, and he ended up taking the wrong turn and got himself stuck upside down. Like he was like, basically he went around a curve and his feet got stuck hanging and his head was down. So all the blood's pooling to his head. He was in there for like 48 to 72 hours or something. They tried to winch him out with rope, like rescue climbers went in there. Mm-hmm. All they ended up doing was breaking his legs in the process. And he basically just died of cardiac arrest. After, like I said, after like an extended 2-3 day period of just the blood pumping straight to his head.
And that is my biggest fear when it comes to roller coasters that go upside down.
That you're going to get stuck on the roller coaster
upside
in that
down.
Position?
Yeah. Because, sometimes that happens to people, but it's not like for that long of a time. But I could totally see that, me getting stuck up there and going and losing my shit.
I think the greater threat is you've heard of some of those roller coasters that they did, like in Ohio and other places where basically it wasn't even so much a roller coaster as it was a giant tubing setup, and the cart, or whatever you want to call it, jumped the tracks because there was like a kid in there and it just didn't weigh enough as a result because it wasn't full, and it jumped into the protective fencing and netting to prevent it from flying off the track, only in the process took the kid's head off.
I remember hearing things about like kids like seeing their heads on these things, but I didn't know like the actual details of such, because I usually am like, oh, that sucks. Moving along.
I think it's part of the thrill, man. If you're not going on the roller coaster thinking I could die right now, there's a non-zero chance of death.
I know. That's why I don't know why we ever do it, because I've been on some and I'm just like, this is it. I'm going to die right now. There's just no way this is not going to happen. I cannot believe I'm doing this. Why does anybody do this? And then I survive it. I'm just like, I cannot believe I did that. And I cannot believe at some point in the near future, I'm probably going to do something like that again.
Well, I mean, you could do that, or you could go sport fishing off the coast of Venezuela. Again, non-zero chance.
So let's today address this desire of our Lord and Savior Donald Trump, who is trying to invade Venezuela, which seems to be an impending desire of his. I mean, this looks like it's coming. So, but before I really get into the obviousness of that, I think we really need to address this country's desire for getting high.
Go for it, yeah.
And I think its desires...
Should I grab like a weed drink, or should I just go take a hit right now? Should I just buckle in that way?
You know what? I didn't even think that would have probably been a good idea, but it is early in the morning while we're doing this, so I don't know.
If I take it now, it'll kick in right around noon. And I think that's socially appropriate.
But by then, we'll probably be done.
So it is a Wednesday, right? So this feels like a bit like an episode of It's Always Sunny. Like 11 a.m. Wednesday. It's like,
Yes.
kind of
They're always got a beer in their hands.
Exactly.
Because
they own a bar. They should be.
I would think after a while, like if I did, I would be like, I'm tired of drinking. That's my thing. It's like I would exhaust, like, all right, I've had every single possible beer we sell that we're ever going to sell. I don't need to have any more today.
This is why hard drugs exist and why there's a demand for it, among other reasons. But yeah, let's talk about, tell me about why we love drugs so much.
Well, not only our desire to get high, but Trump is using drugs as his rallying cry when it comes to other countries. So, and I think we're going to pick up on a very repeatable story where we have this rhyming history that we've mentioned before about Stephen Miller and his ridiculous plagiarizing of Nazi paperwork. And I'm thinking that maybe we have like a little jingle in future podcasts where we call it rhyme time. Because so people know that things are starting to rhyme, much like so-and-so, and let's do something before it really turns to shit. Like, hey guys, listen to this. Does this not sound familiar to you? Wake up, wake up, wake up.
I'm all for a good jingle.
So we're gonna start.
I am partial to the Oscar Mayer Wiener song personally.
What was it? OSCAR? How did that go?
My baloney
has a first name. That's it.
OSCAR. My baloney has a second name. It's MAYER. Yep. That is the only time I will ever sing on this podcast, and it will be the Oscar Mayer jingle.
So you did it because for rhyme time, I was like, I'm not going to be rhyming. That would be just like horrific for everyone. But yours was not so bad. I appreciate that. I heard like the little kid in you coming out.
It really was. It was my childhood just coming to the front here. Yeah. Going, what my inner child going, what the fuck happened? Look, and I just pushed him down deep inside again.
That little boy on the TV screen. That's you. So we're going to go back, all the way back to the 1860s during the Civil War, where...
Oh, all right. Let's do it.
Men got shot, hurt really badly, pieces blown up, and if that wasn't bad enough, they were getting dysentery from the poor conditions in their camps. Now, until this week, I didn't really know what dysentery was. I knew it was some kind of stomach issue, but I didn't know the severity of dysentery.
It's the worst diarrhea you'll ever have.
Yes.
Basically.
And they didn't know much about germs back then. So they didn't really have any kind of hope for people with dysentery because you're basically having an infection in your intestines and a lot of times you're bleeding out your ass. That's kind of probably where people get it from, the idea of that. So you basically dehydrated yourself to death most of the time. So they turned to opium derivatives, mainly morphine, which help with the pain of the soldiers being injured and mortally wounded at times. And it also constipated you to stop shitting yourself. Okay. It didn't necessarily save you, since dysentery was in actuality one of the most leading cause of death during the Civil War, more so than actually being shot, is quite insane. So this was trying to help. Yeah.
No, classic combat, right? Your casualties are overwhelmingly, or not even, maybe not overwhelmingly, slight majority. It's camp diseases.
It was like that, right? With the dysentery, World War I, right? The flu basically wiped out so many people.
Tuberculosis, the flu, right? All these easily communicable diseases, typhus, right? Another one that kind of, all sorts of airborne diseases pass along quickly and, through the water supply, through the food supply, because, we just didn't have germ theory the way we do currently. And
you're talking about the 1860s. Yeah, we have no refrigeration. That meat is it looks good still. It's like 4 days old. It's been left outside.
No anesthetic either, right? Any of those battlefield amputations are just you're going in raw dog on those. That's not really the way you want to do it, but that's all they had at the time. So I didn't realize that they were using opium or opiates rather, right? Morphine and all that to basically block people up to keep them from dehydrating. That's interesting.
I mean, I guess it worked to some extent, but they still lost a lot of men through it.
Okay.
And so morphine helped these people survive, and morphine has its own incredible history and future from this point for us. And this to me shows you how drugs play maybe not the healthiest and not the role in our everyday lives, but how you see them in things that we don't even really know about, that we use on a daily basis, that are still kind of habit forming and addictive, but that are okay. And morphine was kind of the impetus to a lot of these things. And so morphine was discovered by Friedrich Wilhelm Adam Sertner, of course, German. He was an uneducated 21-year-old pharmacist's assistant. So, hey, everybody, you can change the world too. You don't have to be some MIT or Harvard graduate. He was curious as fuck, and he was willing, like every good scientist, to experiment on himself.
Like any good 21-year-old who's had enough drinks and it's like, all right, the beer isn't hitting the way it used to. What else can I do here?
So he managed to isolate an organic alkaloid compound from the opium poppy. He found that this opium alkaloid had 10 times the power of processed opium. And he named the substance morphine after Morpheus, the Greek god of dreams, for its tendency to cause some sleep, which I probably could have used last night at 3 o'clock in the morning when I couldn't sleep. And all my OCD kicked in and all I could keep thinking about was drugs in Venezuela.
Remember, kids, like and subscribe so Adam can get his hit of morphine.
So most of his work was originally just ignored. But because of the chemistry aspect, where he created a new acid and a new alkaline base, the morphium, eventually caught on with chemists and doctors who started isolating other natural plant alkaloids. And it sparked basically what became our emergence in modern pharmaceutical industry. Without this, there might not be, or it might have taken a whole lot longer for this to happen. So other researchers started doing it and created other organic substances like caffeine in 1820 and nicotine 8 years later. So all drugs that we kind of use every day. I mean, I don't know if I'm addicted to coffee, but I do have probably, like, shame to say, maybe 6 to 8 cups a day, or whatever it is. So this has transformed our society but from a drug that we have now, poo-pooed, and which ends up turning into other things that we try to ignore and vilify as much as we can. So eventually by the 1850s, we figured out new kinds of syringes to inject the morphine, and it takes us back to the Civil War, where now these soldiers who thankfully survived the Civil War are now returning home, but they're hooked on morphine. So they still needed it. And luckily for them, morphine you could buy at your local drugstore, which would be fucking fascinating today. Like, I'll take that bag of Doritos and a syringe full of morphine, please.
No, I mean, this is a pretty recurring theme, right? These veterans come back from war, and if they were injured, they were getting these really heavy narcotics, right? These very, undiluted opiates, and they became addicted, right? Through the military, we created a huge amount of addiction, and then once the war was over, we sent these people home with PTSD
and no help
and chronic pain, and nothing but relatively easy access to hard drugs.
Yes.
Right, on a quarter store, just like you said. Yeah, so we created the own conditions of the demand for drugs.
Right.
In this country.
And you're going to see how this continues, this rhyming source throughout. So now you have this massive addiction crisis. It is estimated that some 400,000 veterans may have been addicted during the Civil War. And when you take into consideration that the United States population at the time was about 32 million, that's an obscene number, which, if you multiply that by around 10-ish, which would get us to the population now, would be around 4 million, which is very similar to our future opioid crisis from this one, which was considered our first opioid crisis.
That's nutty, 400,000, because I think the total number of casualties was around 700,000.
Yes.
In the Civil War. So you're saying 400,000 addictions were caused based off the injuries.
Yeah. So especially if the dysentery was like the biggest problem during the Civil War, those people may have actually survived with morphine.
Jeez.
And they just go home and they're like, okay, I need this. So now you have this very similar to us with our oxycodone, crisis that started where people were giving this drugs and opiates to people who had pain And all of a sudden, maybe Purdue, Pharma said it wasn't addictive. They knew very well it was. They started giving it out like candy to basically addict the people. So the physicians...
Well, they developed that hoping for a non-addictive version of morphine, right? Because it was so problematic.
Right. So we're going to get to something similar to that. Okay. So by the 1870s, they were aware of this problem with morphine and how people were so addicted that a addictive alternative by C.R. Alder White, a chemist in London Hospital, came up with diacetylmorphine. And a Henrik Dresser, another German, who's a chemist at Bayer Laboratories, developed and tested his semi-synthetic drug on animals, humans, and once again, can't let it go unnoticed, on himself, just like they all have to do. And he found that it was a powerful painkiller and appeared effective for respiratory ailments. So they began marketing it as a pain reliever and a sedative for coughing. So because of its heroic ability to relieve pain, guess what they called it?
Idea.
Heroin. Smack dope China White.
Yeah, China White or black tar? What are we going with here?
The pure stuff. They said that heroin
the OG.
was up to 5 times stronger than morphine and far less habit forming. Now we're getting to sound like the Purdue Pharma. And it had the ability to open up airwaves in the body, and they started selling it everywhere. Obviously the doctors and the medical profession were all over this, but they then soon recognized that their patients were developing tolerances and addictions as well. So 15 years after it was launched, Bayer stopped production. I'm guessing, without getting really deep into the nitty-gritty, that they probably didn't do that much testing, or for a very long period of time. Because if you're testing on people, how are you not seeing that this is more addictive? Because basically, from 15 years from when you launched it to later, they canceled it.
I'm pretty sure their thought process was, this shit is good.
I mean, and they're also German, so you never know if they had an ulterior motive.
Well, they also invented crystal meth, right, as a way to keep bomber pilots going on long overnight, sorties during World War II. So, you win some, you lose some there.
I guess. So once they stopped production, you have the black market start forming in the United States in the 1920s, where the term junkie was coined, people who collected junk metal and scrap metal to sell for drugs, which I never knew until now.
I had no idea that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Okay.
So you could imagine how hard times were with this addiction crisis in the United States that we really don't talk much about today. So you had this
We don't?
No, meaning for back then. Now it's just
okay,
we never had drugs this bad. We never had addiction like this. Well, technically we did. We didn't have the internet then and political guys shoving it down our throats all the time.
Okay.
Because it's not new to have these crises. That's why they consider the morphine crisis to be now the first opioid crisis. Mm. So now you have the heroin surge here. And here we realized that the oxycodone and all that stuff was bad. So we try to make it more difficult to obtain and make it more expensive to obtain. So what did the people in the United States do now when they couldn't get the painkillers like they used to? They went back to heroin. So now you had this surge in heroin use and addiction, same addiction, and now overdosing. Fentanyl was completely created because it's completely synthetic, and it's 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. So they could put just a teeny tiny amount, like a few grains of table salt, into other heroin and mix it with other drugs to give you similar effects. But if you're fucking off, you kill your user.
What's the time frame on this again? Is this still immediately post-war? Post-Civil War?
So I just was showing you the fentanyl thing, which is how it relates to now with the heroin. Because now we just got off the oxycodone. Now we're on heroin. Very similar to we just got off morphine. We're on heroin. But now we're mixing in with fentanyl now, which is very cheap and synthetic and manufactured. So there's no more growing process. It's all done in labs.
Okay.
So you have your overdoses, and now where do these drugs come from, though? But before we get to that, cocaine was also prevalent at this time. You could used to sell it in their catalogs, which is mind-boggling to me.
Really?
Yes. For $1.50, you could get a syringe and a small amount of cocaine. Now, I think $1.50 probably was a little pricey then, so I'm assuming this was like a luxury type thing, I'm guessing.
My God, we really used to be a proper country.
So you imagine those kids waiting for that Christmas catalog, and it's like, here's some coke.
Sears, the original Silk Road. I think they can really make a comeback with that tagline. Sears, if you're still out there, hit me up.
Yo,
Your marketing
that'll
team.
be our first shirt design. Since it'll be out of business, we could probably get away with it. So now at this point, you had an American pharmacist named John Pemberton, who was a Civil War vet and was addicted to morphine. He wanted to use cocaine as a form of treatment. So he created Pemberton's French wine coca, which later he had to change because Georgia banned alcohol. So they replaced the wine with sugar, and now you have today's Coca-Cola. So you have nicotine, you have the sugariest shit in the world, Coke, you have caffeine, all derived from these drugs that really, their only problem with these drugs is they're habit forming. And we don't have a...
So hold on. So just, before you keep going, so what we did was we took three of the most addictive things, cocaine, caffeine, and sugar, and we blended them all up into Coca-Cola.
Basically.
Amazing.
And eventually we took out the cocaine when we decided that Coca-Cola removed the cocaine sooner than they were required to. I think they were able to do it cheaper by getting rid of it.
Like two out of three ain't bad, and no one's going to tell the difference.
I am curious to know what it originally tasted like with the wine instead of the sugar, but I mean, you have...
you know what? With a little ingenuity, there's no reason you can't recreate it. I mean, or you could always just sprinkle a little bit of cocaine into your modern day Coca-Cola.
But
isn't that a thing though? Haven't you seen that online? It's that the half red wine, half Coca-Cola cocktail.
No, I have not.
Yeah, no, people do that. I've seen like, it's not a challenge so much, but it's like hey, I'm making this thing, and it's like red wine and Coca-Cola 50-50. And people are like, actually, this is pretty good. Now that makes sense.
Well, yeah, because they're bringing it back to the roots, basically, except the fact that it didn't have probably, I don't know how much the sugar content then would, I mean, you're cutting it to 50%, but maybe the sugar ratio would still be off. But yeah.
Well, that's where you sprinkle the cocaine back in.
Or you use, Diet Coke might change that. I said, use Diet Coke and then you put your own sugar in there.
No, you can't do Diet Coke. That's the 80s, man. That's pure cocaine territory right there at that point. No, you got to go OG. So you got to, red wine, Coca-Cola. You got to, which I think you got to do is you got to do Mexican Coke with the actual sugar, not the high fructose corn syrup.
Yes, 100%.
And then sprinkle in a few grams of Coke on top of that. Perfect.
Yeah, I think we were onto something.
I've got the specialty cocktail for my Christmas party ready to go now.
Can I line up now?
You'll be my taste tester.
No problem. This is going to bring back I just think you had this guy. It's just like fascinating that all we do is demonize these drugs because they're addictive instead of working on the fact that they're addictive and what we can do to somehow help the people who become addictive and become less addictive to it. There's nothing wrong with the drugs, and people have created amazing things because of these drugs. And they've helped. How many people have they helped, go through tremendous amounts of pain? Because you're on a fucking battlefield. I want to be fucking shot up with whatever you fucking have to stop me from carrying that maybe below my knee, my leg is missing.
Right.
So that's just, ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I think the motivations out of creating these things and inventing them comes out of a good place, right? It's to help these soldiers who are in horrific pain, right, manage that. And it's more the response we've taken to it since.
Yes. Constantly
is really
it.
the more problematic thing, right? It's that whole Puritanism, right? Of, if you fail or you're not successful, rather it's a personal moral failing and not, not being a victim of circumstance necessarily, but just like getting dealt a shitty set of cards.
No, yeah, definitely.
And doing the best you can with it.
Yeah, 100%. Because you...
Gotta love America.
Shit happens sometimes. You get injured, anything happens, you give in something, you don't know what the effects will be. You're like, okay, this helps. I'm able to do my work now. I'm able to get back on my feet, but I feel like I still need it. What am I going to do? And if there's no place where you can go, you know what, maybe I could get some help here where I can afford that help and they'll help me do something about it. But good luck. It's a lot cheaper usually to get that pill to keep you going than the alternative.
Cheap and easy.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you had cocaine, which was so widely used that employers would give it to their day workers to help them work harder and faster. So you
Gotta love capitalism.
gotta
love capitalism.
imagine sitting in that break room and taking hits of Coke instead of coffee nowadays.
Yeah, just be out in the fields and just the lead, the supervisor just comes around and gives you a little bump, keep you going every 20 minutes.
All right. So started getting out of control, and then you had the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914, which began to regulate the opioids, and then the Anti-Heroin Act of 1924, which banned the sale and import and manufacturing of heroin and pretty much stopped cocaine as well. So these regulated...
And this is during... And that's in the 1920s. That's during Prohibition.
Right during... We started slightly before, right, and then we doubled in the middle of Prohibition with 1924's anti-terror. We first made it really almost impossible to get anymore with the taxes and the regulations. It kind of started dying down, and then we're just put the final nail in the coffin by saying, hey, you can't sell it, you can't import it, and you can't make it. So then how do I get it to use? It's kind of like, if all these other things are illegal, therefore my use becomes illegal because where does it come from then?
God, what a dick move. All right.
So then you had Prohibition in the 20s until 1933. And then in 1937, you had the Marijuana Tax Act, making it also cost prohibitive. And it was also to focus on the Mexicans who came into the country during the 1910s after fleeing the Mexican Revolution. But we didn't really enforce the Marijuana Tax Act too much. That's why you had the hippies of the 60s, because it wasn't really that widely enforced. And now back to something we touched on earlier. So you still had drug use rising, and now Vietnam vets were returning addicted to heroin.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredibly cheap and incredibly available. But, most did not stay addicted, which was interesting. A lot of them were able to get over it. One reason was the cost. Heroin is a lot more money in the United States than it was in Vietnam. It was also more pure in Vietnam. And I'm guessing that when you're not facing impending death every day, maybe you no longer feel the need to get high in some of these circumstances. So by a year or two, the majority of people no longer were addicted. But when you came back, you were addicted for sure before you had time to reacclimate. But that's when Nixon steps in with his declaration on creating the war on drugs.
Right.
Where drug abuse became public enemy number one. Where you had the Controlled Substance Act, where we started getting those lovely schedules that we all know.
Yep.
And somehow marijuana ended up on the same level as heroin, which today is, hopefully going to get undone at some point.
Well, that wasn't an accident, right? They were deliberately targeting two groups, right? And this is the John Ehrlichman, who was his aide, right? Who's in 1994.
Talk about that, yeah.
Yep.
So what you had then, a couple of years later, you had the creation of the DEA, which had a budget of less than $75 million, which now is up to around $3 billion a year. Mm-hmm. And you could see how what you just mentioned, Ehrlichman, is kind of like a very copycat of this administration. It's just what can we do subtly on something? So you had in the 1994 interview by journalist Dan Baum, President Nixon's domestic policy chief, John Ehrlichman, provided inside information suggesting that the war on drugs campaign had ulterior motives, which mainly involved Nixon keeping his job. Now, this did not come out in 1994 because the journalist did not find it relevant to what he was writing about at the time. So this didn't come out until 2016 when he published in Harper's Magazine, Legalize It All, How to Win the War on Drugs. Now, in fairness, Ehrlichman's family disputes the claims because their father was not alive to respond to them. And they said that their father was not racist. And maybe this, I don't know if it necessarily has to do with racism, even though it does. But in his sense, he was working for who he was working for.
Yeah, I mean, look, then Nixon was no saint, right?
Right.
But this was more about, and we talked about this last week, right, with COINTELPRO and Project Chaos, right? This was about rooting out domestic dissent and right, because anti-Vietnam sentiment was huge, and you had all these hippies in the streets protesting. You have people from poor socioeconomic backgrounds were overwhelmingly the ones being sent over to war, right? Mr. President Bone Spurs and his cohorts, kind of who were in the elite, got to get their deferments, and it was overwhelmingly Vietnam. World War II, we were sending our best and brightest. And Vietnam was a very specific approach to not sending our best and brightest, right? It was to send our most desperate, our most, put upon citizens. And so what do you have domestically? If you can put on the TV cracking down on black people, especially inner city folks, right? You've already got white flight coming out of the cities, and you could crack down on these hippies, especially in the wake of the Manson murders, right? There's just a lot of negativity towards the hippie community and that whole kind of, counterculture outside of the mainstream sort. The war on drugs was amazing because pot was a common denominator. So now you criminalize drugs, you demonize them, and now you're going after the perceived enemies of the administration and showing to, frankly, scared white people in the suburbs who don't like either one of these groups, showing that you're doing something about it and that you're, quote unquote, protecting them from these dissidents.
Yep. And Ehrlichman also served 18 months in prison for the Watergate scandal. So he probably felt a little betrayed by Nixon and didn't particularly like him that well. But to me, what really signified that this is probably factual, what he goes on to say, which you've covered a great deal of it just now, that in September of 2024, which is crazy that it was discovered so recently, on the Nixon tapes from 1973, it was heard that he said he didn't think marijuana was such a bad thing and that the penalties were excessive, but yet it still was on Schedule 1. So, and it was a cannabis group that just listened to these tapes. I mean, it makes sense. You got the president who created this war on drugs. You're going to try to listen to what he talked about since Nixon loved recording his voice. It's really quite incredible.
The Nixon tapes, the gift that just keeps on giving.
Yeah, but they still remain, those schedules still remain today, even though I would say a lot of this stuff has been watered down by states' legalization efforts. So now that is out of the way, so what did he say? So Ehrlichman explained that Nixon campaign had two enemies, which you've touched on, the anti-war left and black people. Ehrlichman was quoted as saying, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be against the war or black." Makes sense. You could probably try to make it illegal to be against the war, but it's going to be really hard to make it illegal to be black. So by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Sounds a lot like Fox News and Newsmax mission statement, in my opinion. I mean, this is what we're bombarded with constantly, and now even more. So as we shift today, it's brown people, it's liberals. It's not the hippies, it's the liberals, and it's not black people, it's brown people. So now you have fentanyl, which since 2019, which originally was manufactured mostly in China and shipped to the United States and to Mexico to find its way into the United States. Kind of because of the Trump tariffs back then and right before COVID, they said we were not going to, manufacture it anymore to just appease Trump and stuff. But that didn't stop them from being the main supplier of the ingredients to Mexico. So we won't make it anymore, but we're just going to send it to you to make.
Well, what's better business? What's more American than offshoring production to cheaper locales and then importing the finished product back in? I could probably pull up 10 LinkedIn articles talking about how this is a good thing for the shareholders.
So, which is it's just amazing how these things work. So now you have these illegal immigrants being vilified. A top patrol officer even said we are arresting people based on how they look. So it's all about brown people. It's not necessarily you're an illegal immigrant. You look like one. So we're going to arrest you. But why the hell?
Yeah, it's It's not that they're arresting a guy named Ramon Martinez. It's they're arresting someone who
Looks like
might
Ramon.
look like someone named Ramon Martinez.
Exactly.
Regardless. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this in Chicago, especially right now, right? With ICE raiding entire buildings and arresting migrants and citizens alike without due process, without due cause, without a warrant, right? In full violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, we'll find out the answers later. That's why.
Right. They're wrapping everyone up, and then, look, if you're an American citizen, you should not be being detained for several hours by masked unmarked men who then check your citizenship papers afterwards, right? It's less odious sounding than, the Germans value papers, but it's no less hideous, right? And no citizen should ever go through that.
Yeah, because you got to be like, when you're getting grabbed, you're like, well, I don't have my citizenship papers on me. Well, sir, then you're going to be detained until you find them. But you can't leave to go find them. You have to get a family member to go find them for you and bring them in. So you'll be here until then.
And hope you haven't been moved to some other detention facility and you're in the middle of being processed and they don't actually know where you are because the paperwork isn't done.
Yeah, exactly. So what the hell does this have to do with Venezuela? With all this issues, why not Colombia? Everyone has heard of, Pablo Escobar, who was the king of the cocaine and heroin. They have tons of brown people. They have cartels, but they've been smart over the years. And just like we were saying about the China distributing and moving everything to Mexico, Colombia has little to do with the United States anymore. They ship everything through Mexico. They sell it to the gangs in Mexico. They basically wash their hands of it. So they're like, we have no gangs in the United States. We have nothing to do with the United States. You guys distribute the shit. We're out of it. So it's very hard to pinpoint them anymore because their production and power has peaked in the last few years, and they're slowly not is what they used to be. They also have
it's been growing. It's been increasing over the last few years.
What's that?
Their cocaine production, Colombia.
Yes, their
not Venezuela,
production,
Colombia.
but the power that they wield in the hemisphere, so to speak, they've kind of put it off to somebody else because they're one of their main gangs there are working with the president on. They're starting to get into other things like gold mining and all these other things that are just as lucrative because gold is over $4,000 an ounce now. So they're working to do stuff, but you also have a president they're still a democracy, Colombia, even though he was a previous Marxist and has a lot of Trump tendencies where he threatens opponents and accuses them of coups and they should be locked up. So, but you still have that aspect of a democracy and
you do. Well, go ahead.
And a non-face in the United States that you could say, other than them being brown, to be like, you guys, because they've tried to do their best to keep their production away and everything away and have somebody else being the front man. It's kind of like Apple. They don't make any of their shit, basically, but they're the front man. They design it, they give it to a company that makes all the stuff for them, and then they sell it. This is what Colombia basically has found a way to work on, where they're like, here, this is our drugs, you take care of the rest. You don't see us, and everything's going to be fine. So it's pretty hard to invade a democracy.
I don't know that I would agree with your characterization of Colombia, right? Their production of cocaine has increased significantly, but they've also taken they're starting to take a different approach, right? So for years they took a lot of our money. They get about $380 billion, I believe it is, in aid and subsidy from us. It's either million or billion. I apologize. I'm a hack and a fraud. I don't have the number in front of me, but they get this money to.
It's probably a million because a billion would be a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah, it's probably 380 million. That's probably correct. They get a lot of money from us for counter trafficking and rooting out, narcotics production and trafficking within our country. They are pivoting away from that. And Petro, who's the president, he's come out recently saying, look, the problem is not the cultivation, right? Cultivation is increasing, but the production of cocaine is actually pretty steady at the moment. They don't need arms and military. What they need, and he's absolutely right, is a reduction in demand from the U.S. and Europe. The problem is not the cultivation and creation of it. it's the fundamental fact that we white people in the Western, part of the world want this shit.
Yes, well,
and
100%.
that's why it continues to be a problem. And so he's actually been,
but their main
kind of
the main drug, heroin, has diminished tremendously from Colombia over the years, and it's shifted to other places.
That's more Mexico at the moment, and more the cartels there. Correct. But I mean, as of 3 weeks ago, on September 16th, Colombia, the Trump administration decertified them as a counter-narcotic ally.
Yes, I mean, he banned the president's visa after his UN speech.
Well, that's after he spoke out on Gaza more than anything, but he was also speaking out against the drugs and whatnot as well, right? And there's a lot of threat of sanctions and everything as a result of that. So they're still kind of we're still working together with the Colombians at this point, but it's starting to fall apart.
And cocaine has always been the yuppie rich man drug in the 80s and 90s. So it's like the heroin is the poor man drug. So that's the one we really don't like. You could see now, we're getting closer and closer to legalizing marijuana, and because now we're allowed to grow it to some extent here, and that's all fine and dandy. And maybe that's why they want to crack down on all the other drugs to make sure just marijuana is the one that's left standing. Who knows if that is not playing a role in this, or if Trump has investments in these weed companies.
Well, so I think it actually speaks more broadly to the geopolitical aspirations in and around Latin and South America, which I don't want to jump ahead here. I think you're probably going to get to this organically, right? But Colombia is probably 2 steps behind, or our approach to Colombia is probably a solid 2 steps behind what our current approach to Venezuela is.
Yes.
For similar reasons. But I want you to run with this, so go for it. I'll jump ahead of you. And
I really do think, for as of now, that Colombia being a democracy makes it a little bit more difficult to just want to.
Yes.
So
right, because Maduro and then Chavez before him have basically turned Venezuela into a dictatorship, and it was actually a pretty wealthy, successful democracy post-military junta back in the 50s, right? And ever since then, and now it's last 20 years, right? When did Chavez get in? 1998, right? It's been falling apart ever since.
Right. So, but then you look at it and say, well, why not Mexico? Because that is the majority of drugs, the majority of illegal immigrants all come from America. They have gangs in the United States, like the Mexican Mafia and Trump's favorite MS-13. They are like...
No, MS-13 is...
It's
Honduran?
Well, they've kind of branched out into accepting other cultures. So they're still considered somewhat of a Mexican, but they're not like only Mexican.
Okay.
They're smart. Why not integrate any good person from Latin America? And I have a feeling a lot of these gangs that either originated in Mexico or somewhat have its and other, members from other countries at this point. Very few are, I guess, Nazis, where it's like you can only be from this one country.
Okay, gotcha. So I'm just looking right now. Yeah, so sorry, it was Salvadoran, and then it spread to Honduras, and then Guatemala.
So they incorporate them all.
Yeah.
But I think the Mexican Mafia might be the largest one. I think they're in California.
But they play nicely with the Mexican cartels.
Right. So they spread out everywhere because they don't play favorites. So these are like crossing off a lot of those lists that Trump, is big time hater of. But they are also a democracy, Mexico. But even more important is the economy. Mexico is our biggest trade partner with over $800 billion a year in trade. So the last thing you want to do if you're Donald Trump, when you're trying to consolidate power in a country, is to go and destroy your economy before you do that. Because it would make absolutely no sense. And I think that's why it leaves us with Venezuela. They have that Tres de Agua, which Trump also loves to mention. And they are in this country, and they're recognizable. They are being considered terrorists and part of an invasion. So they're using a lot of those keywords. Now, Venezuela doesn't really produce much in the way of drugs, but they are one of the biggest drug ports for Colombia to ship drugs to the Caribbean and Europe.
And that's a geostrategic thing, right?
Yes.
Because they're on the northern end of South America, and they have access to both the Caribbean and the Atlantic.
Right, which Colombia doesn't. So it makes total sense. So now you have this failed state, basically, run by a dictator, Maduro, who lost his last election, but still stayed in power, cracked down on protesters. The opposition leader, Edmundo Gonzalez, who won according to the Carter Center and other electoral experts, left and has supported Trump in attacking Venezuela. So the person who supposedly won the Venezuela election is in support of this. So now you have, in early August, you had Trump sign a secret directive authorizing military action against Latin American drug cartels. He's labeled Maduro a narco-terrorist, a fugitive, and advertised a $50 million reward for his arrest. And now they've deployed Marines and warships off Venezuela's coast and have recently started blowing up their boats. Now you would say, well, usually this is the National Guard's, not the National Guard, isn't, who's the ocean military?
Talking about the Coast
Guard. Thank you. God damn it. Who'd have thought National Guard would be in the news so much that would be the thing that just sticks in your head? Well, they're the ones who usually, meet these boats, board these boats, take a look at these boats. So why wouldn't we be boarding these boats? When you don't want to know the answer, why would you bother doing that?
Exactly.
So you blow it up. And let's be honest, Venezuela is also the country that has its only allies and friends are ones we don't really like Russia and Cuba and China. So they're the lowest hanging fruit to get this party started. So he's continued to raise the stakes, and he's declared a non-international armed conflict against drug cartels whose members were now considered unlawful combatants. He is laying the groundwork for something far greater than just blowing up some boats in the water. He has justified its strikes of a crackdown on these narco-traffickers because they're flooding its streets with drugs, supposedly at Maduro's request. They're the enemies of all humanity, Trump told the UN last month, vowing to blow such terrorist thugs out of existence. Because, that's what Mexico, Colombia, and all these countries do. They just send us drugs, whether we want them or not. They're just there on the streets everywhere because nobody in this country really wants them. They just send them here, which it's just like... It's crazy. They flood our streets with drugs.
Again, it's demand. It's not they're just shoving supply onto our shores. It's we as you've shown, right? We have 150 to almost 200 years of steady demand for these things.
Exactly. And it's like if we wanted, if all of a sudden avocados, which some cartels have gotten in the business of avocados, if avocados were $10 an avocado and we just had to have them every single day, we would just be flooded with avocados. People want drugs. They have an effect that people happen to like. Now, we just need to regulate that in a way where it doesn't become an addictive habit-forming issue and care about the people who are on it instead of just constantly blaming people for supplying you with the thing you're requesting. Like you call up
I think the bigger problem is, go ahead.
No, I was just going to compare it to like say if you call up a cell phone company and they're like, yeah, I want some things like, HBO. And they're like, okay, we could give you HBO and Cinemax and all these things that we're going to give you. And they're like, okay, I'll take that because I want that. It's not like they're shoving it down your throat. You could just say, no, I don't want to pay for that shit. Now, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, right, Maduro is not, right, it has been on Trump's radar since his first term, right, back in the day. I mean, I don't know if he won the first election legitimately. I don't recall, but he's on his third term now. It just started earlier this year. The elections were in the middle of 2024. And, Juan Guaido, who was the guy who won back in 2018, 2019, we backed him publicly and openly. A lot of political dirty tricks by the Maduro regime to, change the Constitution to take over the legislative branch. Not all that dissimilar from the shit we talked about in the Reichstag fire, right? Where it was a lot of just, writing out of opposition and co-opting them to kind of impose your will. And the same thing happened again. Edmundo Urrutia, right? By all accounts, when you go by district voting in last year's election, won by 30 points. Yet the official tally at the national level was that Maduro won by 51%.
Yeah.
Right. credit to him for not saying
No, you-
97% like all other dictators do. I really do give him a lot of credit for that. But they have part of their election law is that they have to reveal the district by district voting results. And well, of course, what did Maduro do? He just gave the 51% national number and called it a day and said, and all this. And there's been a lot of on the ground work to reveal that, no, actually, you got your ass handed to you. But again, he got sworn in at the beginning of this year because he de facto controls
Everything.
the entire government,
Yeah.
the legislative branch and the courts and whatnot there.
And they have really good voting there with their machines. Chavez made sure of that so he would see that when he's winning.
Yes.
And so it's like, hey, I won. Look, you could see the records, but Maduro didn't get rid of those machines.
No, yeah, you're right. It's a Chavez implementation was that he wanted super secure, super above board voting. And then, of course, Maduro comes in and it's just like, yeah, we're going to keep that so it looks good, but we're going to lie about everything else. And we're going to take, it's been a slow takeover of that country and a slow slide into irrelevance. But my point was Maduro's on their radar because he's been on their radar for a while. But the narcotics, right, as you said, they're not a producer. They are a port of access, distribution, but they're not really traffickers in and of themselves, right? It's really not coming from Venezuela. This is just all cover to what you said. They are, because we have been, because we've been anti-Chavez, we've been anti-Maduro, we have been putting them on sanctions, right? We have been cutting them out and trying to do economic pressure to get the regime change that we want. And what has happened is they've cozied up to Russia. They have cozied up to China. They have cozied up to other regimes that we are generally not friendly with, or some that we are friendly with, like India and others, to sell their oil, right? Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves.
Yes.
Even larger than Saudi Arabia. But they actually have an incredibly poor production.
Yes, because
Right, and
their
that started under
oil
the
is
Chavez
very
regime.
difficult to get to and to refine.
It is difficult, right? Even when Chavez took over, something like 3.5 billion barrels per day, which was not huge production, but it was decent. But Chavez comes in, he kicks out ExxonMobil, Chevron, and
Yes.
and ConocoPhillips and these others. They lose billions of dollars of infrastructure and investments as a result. He nationalizes it, and then because of his repression in the streets, so many people left.
Yep.
Right. So there's been this huge brain drain in the country. And so between the repression, the brain drain of Venezuelans fleeing the oppression, and just good old fashioned cronyism, the production is now below a million barrels per day. It's like almost a third to a quarter of what it used to be 10, 15 years ago. And so the oil that they are producing, they're selling it overseas. They're selling it to China. They're selling it to Russia, right? And because of U.S. sanctions, it's not dollar denominated anymore. So I think what you're seeing here more broadly is we've got this, we're labeling them narco-terrorists. We're calling them as part of this cartel of the suns, right? We're saying they're part of Tren de Aragua. Really, it's just an excuse for these guys are cozy with our enemies. They're selling to our enemies. And in the same way that we saw all this noise about Greenland, we saw a noise around Canada becoming a 51st state. It's a neo-imperialist view of this is our sphere of influence. This is where we should have exclusivity, not our opponents. And I think what we're really seeing is we're using drugs and the threat of drugs as an excuse to impose our own political will and to get economic control over oil. And Venezuela, I think, has 24% of the world's oil. Iraq had 18, and we invaded Iraq for literally no reason. It had nothing to do with 9/11, but we
Right.
decided to invade it.
Exactly.
Now we're running a similar playbook here.
No, exactly. We have a tendency to love to copy and rhyme our history and be like, ooh, that worked. Let's see. We got attacked on 9/11 by terrorists from Afghanistan, financed by Saudi Arabia. Iraq. That's the answer. Let's go into Iraq.
I mean, this is kind of the modern day Monroe Doctrine, right? Which is, hey, Western Hemisphere is America's, European colonial powers stay out, right? That's what it was in 1820s when he announced that. Mike Pompeo, Rex Tillerman, all those guys from Trump's first term came out and they explicitly said, John Bolton, right? they revived that doctrine. They brought it back up and they were like, this is our approach. And Marco Rubio, right, current Secretary of State, he continues that same framing, like the Western Hemisphere is our area of influence. Stay out. We're going to deal with all this. And then, yeah, I mean, look, we overthrew Jacob Arbenz's government in Guatemala because United Fruit was at the risk of losing land that they owned. And he wanted to just do land reforms, right? And we couped him. And just, we've done that so many times through Latin America over the years. But this is a pretty clear, right, rhyming parallel to, okay, you've got things we want control over it. And by the way, you've cost U.S. businesses and shareholders their money. Welcome to our military. We're going to send some freedom in your direction.
Yeah. And what greater way to then threaten Mexico and Colombia when you're right behind them and like, hey, guys, we're here. Now pledge your loyalty or you might suffer the same fate.
It's definitely sending a message. And again, this is a regime that's not friendly to us, that we've had our eyes on for a while, right? And yeah, if we invade Venezuela, it is sending a clear and unequivocal message to Colombia, to Mexico, to the Central American nations, right? That El Salvador, Honduras, and everyone around what they're doing regarding gangs. Cocaine comes from Colombia. It comes from Bolivia. It comes from Ecuador. It comes from Peru. You're sending a message to a significant chunk of the countries in the middle of the planet there.
Yeah. But I mean, especially even like what I said about Mexico is like, if the main drug that you've been so concerned about and mentioning, like Trump has with fentanyl for so long, comes from Mexico, this is a really odd approach. If drugs was your biggest concern, that's why it's not.
Well, so here's the other thing, right? And this is, I was doing a little bit of background on this before we, ended this. So obviously there's the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What you're getting is, and this is where Venezuela comes in, this is another reason, Colombian, like the militants, right? The FARC, ELN, the nationalist groups and all that, and Venezuelans, there's a lot of information sharing and military sharing between Russia and these countries at this point, and these groups. They are embedding these people in the Ukrainian freedom groups, right, the international brigades, to learn about drone warfare. And all that drone warfare and those kind of videos you see online, right, of hitting tanks and whatnot, they're learning these firsthand on the ground. And then the Russian advisors are coming in, being flown over, and teaching them these things as well. And the cartels, the Mexican cartels, they're sharing this information, they're learning from each other. And so you're starting to have this very modern, right, almost Call of Duty-esque warfare, right? Things that 10, 15 years ago seemed purely the realm of video games and movies is now a reality, and it's being imported into the Western Hemisphere at this point. That's part of the danger I see if you're looking at this strategically big picture from a national defense perspective. Mexican cartels in and of themselves are not an existential threat militarily to the U.S., but if they have these counterinsurgency programs and training, they're going to be a lot more prepared to deal with, our military if and when we choose to attack them in a lot of ways. Remember when we were talking about SDI, right, the Star Wars program, and how I said it costs $20 of spending on defense for every $1 of offensive capability? Again, you're bringing in these drones and you're putting, kamikaze bombs on them, basically. How do you defend against that? With great difficulty.
Yeah. Yes. I think they're really hoping that Maduro, I think they're really going to base it on that Maduro really did lose that election and that the millions and millions of people don't want him there. They're just, at this point, terrified to say anything other than, yes, we want him here. And that
we also have 600,000 refugees from Venezuela
living
right,
here.
Who are under They were under temporary protected status that Trump extended to them, then Biden extended it, and then Trump
revoked.
Earlier this year, he canceled it. It was supposed to run through like mid-2026, and it's actually, today's October 8th. It's expiring on November 7th. It's got 1 month left for most of these people, and there is no plan on what to do with them. They have to either apply through like other asylum channels, right? The temporary protected status is gone, so they have to look for other channels to stay, or they need to get out, right? And they're going to be targeted by ICE, I'm sure. And what are you doing? You're going to create a humanitarian crisis that's just going to expand the number of refugees fleeing out of a war zone. right? At the same time, that you're not letting the people who are already here who've been fleeing these conditions to stay.
I think that's their goal. Is like, hey, listen, you better take up arms in favor of us, or we're just going to kill you, because we're building prisons. We're putting them in prisons before we ship them out to other places. And, camps have gotten a bad word since the Holocaust and the Japanese internment camps. And now we're going to send you over there, and we really don't give a shit what happens to you. You die by our bombs, or you kill your own people for us. Either way, we don't give a shit. And I think you're seeing that a lot, because we are funding military strike forces with ICE. I mean, they're going into areas in force, making a spectacle, because you could easily start rounding up people here and there, slow amounts, and get the job done eventually, because there's no fucking rush. But here they're going in full on force, looking to cause unrest in this country so they can send in the National Guard and perhaps future military. And I think that plays with Venezuela and the gangs, because remember, the gangs are in this country and they're terrorists. They're an invading force. They're coming for you. And now you have soldiers in another country. You're protesting soldiers on the street. And it's like, well, guys, to your soldiers, look, you're in a country, you're dying for your country, and these people in our streets are fighting you. They don't care about you. You shouldn't give a shit about them either. And he starts to turn the military on you. And I think this is the game plan, that if the gerrymandering that we've talked about, they'll know going into it before elections in 2026 if it's working. If the polls start...
Well, you assume we have elections.
No, and that's what I'm saying. If the polls are showing that it's working, then they're going to, they won't go too heavy-handed. But if it looks like the polls are not working with their gerrymandering and their people are lining up because they want to get him fucking out of here, we're going to have an issue. You're definitely going to have an issue, and I think this is what plays into it. This is their backup plan that they're putting in play just to make sure that they could... It's all a matter of how much cracking on people they have to do, and how much do they have to turn the soldiers against the American people. I think this is a huge part of that, because there's no real reason to invade Venezuela right now. Nothing's changed dramatically over the last few years. Am I right? What's changed?
What's changed is that Maduro lost another election and is back in, and he's still someone that the Trump administration wants out of power.
Right, but
I don't know that that's a change necessarily.
So we've wanted that for years and years now, to get rid of him.
I think this is all cover, right? What you have got like over $500 million of investments by China as part of the Belt and Road Initiative in ports and infrastructure within Venezuela. You've got collaboration, military hardware, advisors, surface-to-air missiles coming from Russia as part of the partnership. Again, we've isolated them economically, and so they've turned to our enemies. This is all about sphere of influence. It's about control. It's about hemispheric hegemony of the U.S. in the Western Hemisphere, and everything that, again, it's the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean's got access to. Oh, wait, no, that's the Gulf of America. And so now you're on America's territory. This is, again, they don't like him. It's not they want to get rid of him because they don't like him, right? There's plenty of people they don't like that they don't actively go after and get rid of. They're going after him because of the geostrategic importance politically of owning the territory and owning the resources and having control over them in a friendly deal that benefits the U.S., right? It's mercantilism, right? It's closed economic systems where all of the colonies and outposts and allies, their resources are for the mother country, right? They're supposed to come back to the homeland, and we're supposed to be able to benefit from them. And if China's dropping $500 million in port infrastructure, that means they're aligning with China, and we don't want that. And we certainly don't want it in our backyard. And so all this, well, we don't like you anyway, you're cheating to win, which, to be clear, they might as well be sharing a fucking playbook at this point, right, of the way that things seem to be going.
Well, that's what we do. Here. That is exactly what we do.
On the surface, you think they'd be BFF, and they'd be like, how'd you do it? Because I want to do the same thing, right? Oh, here's what we're thinking. How did you approach this? But really, it's about control over this. It's the same way that, look, sticking with Central America, right? Manuel Noriega We knew he was a narco trafficker, right? But we backed because of Panama, we backed his regime for years and years until he became a liability, right? And at that point, we got rid of him. Gaddafi, we were okay with him. We were okay with Saddam Hussein. We were okay with all these dictatorships around the world until they no longer benefited us. And then we got rid of them, right? Then we couped that. We instituted regime change. And so as long as we see the benefit to America, financially, economically, geopolitically, then we're gonna tolerate a lot of bullshit that in theory we shouldn't be tolerating. But right now, Maduro doesn't align with that, and he doesn't align with us in the way we want to take advantage of the situation, and so he's got to go.
Yeah, because we do really have a tendency to attack what we want, not what we have.
Yes.
And so just like when Trump says he wants a civil war in this country, so he says liberals want a civil war. If they want this, then we have to do that. You see him like with the rhetoric, like we want the Insurrection Act. We'll have to do it. We have to do it. Well, let's see. They're protesting you putting military in there. So you are creating the actual act you want to occur. And I think that's why this is happening now. Because we didn't like Chavez. He was cozying up with Russia and Cuba and all of them for years. But that was okay.
Can I just say, I miss Hugo Chavez. I miss his speech at the UN the day after George Bush spoke, and he talked about how the podium still smelled of sulfur.
Jesus.
From Bush having been there the day before. He was hilarious. Him and Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the Iranian president. Remember that guy? Those motherfuckers. I miss like that 2000, early 2000s geopolitics. Those guys were funny as fuck. They were hilarious. I miss that shit.
But now if you did that, you would be persona non grata in the United States.
Well, they were persona non grata then too, but at least they were funny about it.
But at least they allowed to come.
They still.
I mean, the fact that you would just tell Colombia's president, yeah, you're not really welcome anymore now.
Well, because he spoke out on Gaza, and he's also not cooperating.
And he also, I think, said something negative about Trump.
He did, yeah. He also shit talked Trump. So yeah, now you're not welcome anymore. He's like, that's fine. I said my piece. Everyone heard it.
It's so funny. It's it's a comedy show that has dire consequences.
It's a comedy show where the entire audience and all the players die at the end.
Yes, that's what this appears to be. And the only thing I know in the very end is drugs are going to get the short end of the stick, and prices are going to go up, and Americans are going to get fucked, and they're going to suffer like they always do because it's not going to change their addictions. This is not going to change anything. You're going to make it harder for them to vote. You're going to make freedoms much more difficult. And you're sending people to another country when you really pushed on people that you were the president of peace, because I'm assuming the invasion of Venezuela is like the play for the Nobel Peace Prize. That's what I'm assuming. He's going to bring peace through extreme violence.
War is peace?
Yeah, because I bring so much peace everywhere. I'm going to attack Venezuela. That's okay, because it's peace.
Did you see the video of, it was the Azerbaijan and the Armenian presidents or prime ministers or whatever they have over there. I'm not sure what their structure is. They were meeting, like Emmanuel Macron, the French president, went up to them at some meeting recently, and they're all like shaking hands. And the clip is one of them, the Azerbaijani guy or the Armenian guy, talking about hey, did you hear how Trump, solved our problems? And they all start laughing. All three of them. They're like, yeah, no, we solved this shit ourselves. And then he came in and took credit for all this. They're openly laughing at him.
That's what, he couldn't even get the countries right. What was it? One of them was Albania?
Yes, he said Albania, and Albania
is 1,000 miles away, something like that.
It's in a very different part of Europe, yes.
Oh, God, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Did you send it to me the other day about how Trump, took money away from New York, and then they somehow got it, and he took credit for it?
No, he does that all the time. He will, it was a recent
back
example.
To them because he had to or something?
I think it was counterterrorism funds.
Oh, yeah, I think that's what it was.
A few hundred million of them. And so, he tried to cancel it and he couldn't, right? I think a judge was like, no, fuck, you're not doing this. And then he's like, oh, I gave New York this. And they're like, dude, again, he does this all the time. He creates a problem or he pretends to create a problem, and then he introduces a solution to the problem. And the solution is him just giving back what he took away in the first place. And he goes, see how generous I am? see what a loving, caring president I am. I gave you this money. You should love me for it. It's like, dude, if you never said anything in the first place, we would have had this the entire time.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, he's done that about so many different things. It's almost it's not even there almost isn't a point in even counting every instance of it because it's constant. It's never ending.
It's almost pointless to listen to a word he says because I think most of it doesn't matter. It's what the other people like Stephen Millers of the world say because those are the people that you really got to worry about.
They are the ones you got to worry about. Yeah, no, and I look at this, right, this is just a natural extension of their kind of imperialist view of what's going on here. And ultimately, they want Russia and China, India, and everyone else out of their backyard, right? We don't want these people having an influence in the Americas. And the real question comes like, okay, are you going to then turn your eyes on Colombia if you do a ground invasion of Venezuela, right? Like, what is that going to look like? That's going to be brutal. Are you going to try to do that with Mexico? Because holy shit, from a counterinsurgency perspective in guerrilla warfare, the Mexican cartels, they are very familiar with their territories and they have a lot of experience in fighting, admittedly disorganized and underfunded police forces. But what have we learned from Afghanistan and Iraq? It doesn't take a lot for first world $800-900 billion militaries to be defeated by guys with little more than sticks and stones. What you've got in Venezuela, you've got their military, which has turned, it used to be a pretty good outward facing military. Now it's just about repression internally and a lot of cronyism. But you've also got what is basically really equivalent of the brown shirts, these kind of militias that have a lot of repression on the ground. But again, you've also, Venezuela is playing host to Colombian rebels, right? The FARC and the ELN, and those guys who have been on the radars for ages at this point, a lot of these narco groups. So it's a hornet's nest that potentially we're stepping into here. And it's a huge area.
Yeah, I don't think we're planning on staying very long. I think there's no way, like I said, we're never going to invade Mexico. It's like you never say never. I'm saying never. Because we cannot afford, I mean, listen, unless the United States falls and we're no longer a democracy, I will change my opinion then. I'm hoping that doesn't change. But there's no way an invasion of Mexico will not really, really hurt the American people. We count on them way too much for trade. If you destroy our leading trade partner, so what do? Like, not have cars anymore? Or is this the reason why you want to try to import all these things back into the United States in time for you to invade Mexico? I just think it would be so catastrophic that you will never win another election if there are elections in the United States.
No, I agree. Economically, it would be absolutely catastrophic. They've got, on one hand, they want this whole onshoring repatriation of manufacturing and supply chains, which speaks directly to Mexico and NAFTA and whatever CANMERUS, whatever the subsequent trade treaty that Trump signed.
Oh, that new thing. Yeah. It's a piece of shit.
The one he signed during his first term, and then he came in during his second term and he goes, who signed this shit? And he goes, it's a piece of shit. Who signed this garbage? You did, sir. It was you, Mr. Trump. So on one hand, you've got this kind of economic policy of repatriating and onshoring these things, but you invade another country, those trade routes die instantaneously until the conflict is over. And even at a certain point afterwards, it takes time to rebuild them or start them back up again. We bring in food from Mexico. We bring in finished parts that get assembled here within the borders of the US. I think they know that they can't invade Mexico, that it's not shooting yourself in the foot, it's shooting yourself in the head. Again, they're accusing Maduro of being part of this cartel of the suns thing, which, as far as I can tell, doesn't really exist. It's mostly just posturing around trying to tie them specifically to the narco trade. Tren de Aragua is actually a criminal enterprise on the drug trade, and they're trying to tie them in as these guys are the cartel guys on the ground in the prisons, in the forests, actually creating and distributing the stuff, but that the political and military brass of Venezuela are part of the distribution network. They're the kingpins from a supranational level. They're trying to create these links between the government, Maduro and his generals, and these drug groups.
Yeah. it does not make sense to anybody with half a brain economically on paper. So Venezuela is a low-hanging fruit here. And we didn't like them. We don't like them. We don't like who their friends are. They have a small part in the drug trade. They have a face in the United States with their gangs. Let's go fucking get them, because this is great. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them like, hey, you can use our ports. This is how much it's going to cost you. And that's it. You know, you're a poor nation right now. You barely get by. Yeah, this is what you're going to do to get by. So I totally see that. And I got to believe before the year's up, where he will be, as they say, troops on the ground or whatever we put in there. But we're definitely going to hit some of them. So we're either going to hit them hard first and hope that somebody else goes in and gets rid of him, or we're going to send in a squad to somehow kidnap him, which I don't know how that will change much. But it's going to get uglier for sure.
Right now, we're just striking some boats, right? We're killing fishermen and saying that these are drug boats. We've got 7-8 warships. We've got about between naval and Marines deployed to Puerto Rico. We've got something like 20 F-35s in the area. We've got a nuclear submarine in the area. I got to wonder, what is the game plan here, right? What are we going to attack Venezuela's national infrastructure and their military under this auspices of they're part of the narco trafficking and go for regime change? Is that what it is? And even, let's just say, you conquer Caracas, then what? How do you hold it? Do you just hope that these other people who've been running Guaido or Urrutia or anyone else who've been running as the opposition, that they'll just take over and be friendly to us? I have to presume there's been some conversations around that regarding regime change. But at that point, how much does that impact? Because the military has been co-opted, right? They're all Maduro cronies. They're all on the take at this point. How do you fight the FARC groups and the ELN and the other narco groups, right, Tren de Aragua, without a functional military, without a non-corrupt police force locally? I see it as not all that different from Iraq, where you've got the rise of ISIS in the wake of that, right? You're going to get all these generals who are going to get out of there, right, get out of Dodge, and then they're going to continue the battle underground. It's the goddamn Amazon. And there's a reason that narco trafficking and all these groups is so sticky, right? Because you can just move into the forests, you can move into the mountains, into the jungles, and continue what you're doing. By the way, I don't know if you've noticed, but we don't have a good track record of uprooting jungle-based guerrilla regimes.
Yes, I don't think we ever plan to go that far. I think we're going to go in there, we're going to knock it down, we're going to put Gonzalez in, who won the election apparently. We're going to be like, listen, we're going to put you in there. You have 2 years to clean shit up and then have another election. And you're going to make me look good, because if things fall apart, it's your fault. Because that's Trump's playbook. It's going to be your fault. I put all the best people in there and they just didn't know what they were doing. So he's going to put them in there. They're going to do their thing, and he's going to focus on the United States and once in a while blow shit up in Venezuela and probably have troops there to protect the president he puts in place. I don't think he cares about the rest of the country. I think he's going to say, you're going to have to figure this shit out yourself. But I did my part. Look at me. I'm a strong man. Everybody look at me. Because, that's what you usually do. You want a war right before an election to, get people confidence in you. And that's why I think he wants that playing of the liberals protesting soldiers in the United States while soldiers are in combat. I think he wants that imagery. I think he wants Fox to put that out there, Newsmax to put that imagery out there. Look at these liberals, these terrorist liberals, these pieces of shit. They don't give a shit about America. They only care about the illegal immigrants or the brown people who are killing our men and women. That's the look he's going for. And I think this checks off all his boxes. And just hope it backfires.
Yeah, no, it's following that Nixon playbook. It's the Ehrlich playbook we talked about earlier, right? Demonize these people who oppose the administration's favored approach and tie them to the drug trade and all their street protests and crack down on them militarily. And it plays with a big chunk of people as a result.
And we don't have a Republican Party like we did during Nixon, because Trump has replaced everybody at the FBI and the DOJ. It was like, who are like, yeah, you're going too fucking far. He doesn't have that kind of pushback like Nixon had, where people were like, we're fucking all resigning if you fucking do this shit. And then he's like, all right, I'm going to leave out. Peace out. That's not happening. That's pretty much obvious at this point.
We've covered a lot, man. There's a lot open-ended here, but I think, yeah, the motives here are fairly clear for what they want.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's a wait and see because this is live and in charge right now. This is ongoing. This is perhaps days, weeks, months ahead of what we believe could be a full-on invasion of another country from a president who wants to get out of the war business.
I think you're right. I think they want to have this buttoned up by the midterms next year. So I think we might see an escalation here over the next few months with the goal of cleaning that up by the summer.
Yep. What should be our over-under? How long? So I'm looking like before Christmas or after Christmas do we invade? Do we do a full-on attack or extract Maduro somehow? I think some people have been saying that they're going to find a way to like somehow find where he is and infiltrate and basically capture him somehow.
That'd be interesting. I'm sticking with 2026. I'm saying after Christmas.
I mean, we're already in the middle of October, well, not middle, but close. So you think he's going to be able to stay hard for a bunch of months before we do it, huh?
There have been great advances in erectile dysfunction medication, so he can stay hard for as long as he wants. You set me up for that one, buddy. Come on. You knew what you were doing.
All right. Yes. So I'm going to go with he can't wait that long. He's in need. He needs to release. So he's going before Thanksgiving.
Okay. Thanksgiving.
Before Thanksgiving. So we're talking a month from now.
Wow. That's aggressive time frame. Okay. So let's call it Christmas, right? You're before Christmas. I'm after Christmas. And let's revisit this by the new year and see which one of us is right.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Adam, thank you for taking the lead on this one. This was awesome. Good conversation. And I'm genuinely curious to see how this is all going to play out because this isn't happening overseas. This is affecting us in our backyard and has some real consequences for us as a country.
Yes. And we definitely, people, you can't forget the parallels to so many other things we talked about with Iraq and with Nixon. It's rhyming like crazy. Don't just sleep on it.
Same shit, different day, buddy. All right. Thanks everyone. Stay safe. Be good.
Bye. Idiots Seeking Village is a production of Village Idiots Media. For more, find us online at villageidiotsmedia.com or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and wherever you get podcasts.